Welcome to another episode of Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and this is Dr. Joe Hamlett who's joined me. How are you doing this week, Joe?
I'm doing good, Dave. How are you doing?
Doing most excellent. Another beautiful week.
Yep.
Um, going to jump right into this topic. Kind of excited about it. We're going to talk about what does it mean when we say being not so ordinary. It is part of the name of our podcast, but what does that mean? So we decided to address that this week, and I'm gonna start off by saying that by being not so ordinary, we mean not being status quo, not just accepting the average, being normal with air quotes, if you will, not just going through the motions and just existing. What we're talking about when we say keep on being your not so ordinary you when we exit, and as part of the name of our podcast is what are we doing as individuals to go above and beyond, to really take advantage of who we are as individuals and better ourselves. And when we say better ourselves, we mean better ourselves for ourselves and for others and those around us, whether it be our family, friends, coworkers, peers, colleagues, supervisors, the companies we work for, the churches we belong to, the associations we're involved with, all the above. So, what are we being? How are we developing ourselves to be not so ordinary, going above and beyond? So, with that premise, I'm going to toss the ball over to Joe for a few moments and see what Dr. Joe has to think about this.
Dave, it's funny, we've had so many episodes and we hadn't really explained what not so ordinary really meant to us.
Mhm.
And really what Dave just said, all those things, what are you doing to, be not so ordinary, be the status quo, be just like everybody else. And in my eyes, it's being who you are and being your true self, being genuine to who you are, being, and I've used it, I love using this term now, but being unapologetic you, being who you were meant to be. And that's my side of this, or my addition to what Dave said about being not so ordinary. So in my case, I grew up um, trying to be cool, trying to be like everybody else, trying to fit in. At one point when I was a kid, I wore glasses and I tossed them away just so people wouldn't look at me differently, just so they wouldn't call me a nerd, just so they wouldn't call me four eyes. But you know what happened in that case, or that instance? I had to be set in the front of the class, in the front row of the class, because I couldn't see the board. So trying to be cool, trying to fit in didn't work out so well for me. And to be honest with you, I actually, lived that way for quite a bit of my life and into my adult life, and it was at a detriment. And I did not realize it until my wife pointed it out for me. I'm sitting there after I finished my doctorate degree, and she's looking at me. She's like, "So what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I thought about teaching, becoming an adjunct professor." And and she's like, "Oh yeah, you'll be good at that." I was like, "Why do you think I'll be good at it?" She's like, "Well, for one, you just finished 9 years of school yourself, and you really enjoyed it, and you had a passion for it, and I think it'd be great." And then she said, "The other reason is because you're a nerd." And I was like, "What? I'm not a
What?
nerd. I'm cool. I'm cool Joe,
Joe
so
Cool.
yeah, Joe cool. I mean, I really took offense to the fact that she called me a nerd. She's like, "What are you talking about?" No, I said, What are you talking about? Because I went to school and got my degrees, I'm a nerd now. She's like, "No, you've always been a nerd." And
You've
I was
embraced
like,
your inner
"Are-"
nerd.
I mean, and I was like, "No, I'm not a nerd." And from that point forward, I started to really reflect and think back, and I was like, "You know what? I have always been a nerd." And it wasn't really until that point, I'm 40, almost 50 years old, that I recognized or accepted the fact that I was a nerd. And before, anybody gets, kind of upset or confused by the term. And my version of nerd is just someone who embraces who they are, their differences, whatever makes them special. To me, that's what I refer to as a nerd, not, somebody that, talks like Urkel or wears the glasses or anything like that, but somebody, regardless of what it is, you embrace your difference. You enjoy your difference. And now I do. I love who I am. I love the fact that I am a nerd and like different things. I like the fact that I'm different. I don't want to be like everybody else. So I, love that. So that's part of, again, being that not so ordinary you, that you fully embrace who you are, that you express who you are, that you're not afraid to be who you are. That's being not so ordinary. Not again going along with the crowd because everybody's doing it. Everybody's buying a new car. Everybody's buying a bigger house. All those things. You're moving up in your organization because everybody else is doing it. All those things. You're no longer being yourself, or you're not. You're being ordinary. So my mom passed away a few years ago, and before she passed, she kept telling me, after I just finished my doctorate degree, she kept telling me, be who you are, be true to yourself. And this was right after my wife had told me the same thing. And so for me, this especially this past about 10 years, that's who I've really come to enjoy, me, who I am and the person I am. So that's what being, in my eyes, not so ordinary means, is just being who you are, and not being afraid to express yourself and exhibit who you are. It's not following the norm, not totally disregarding laws and things like that, but being
Right.
who you are, being your true self. And so I feel way, I feel way more confident about who I am. And so that's why I really enjoy doing what we do, because we want to help other people realize that they don't have to meet the status quo, like they said in air quotes, but be who you are, who you're meant to be. And I think if you go down that path, you'll be much happier. And that's where I am today, much happier with who I am. So that's my version of ordinary. I know, Dave, you threw out a lot of different things about, you know, your job, like we talked about, getting an education, joining the military, retiring. Those are all those things that, in some ways, are expected of us. Those are the
Mhm.
things that society says, "Hey, you need to do," and yeah, of course, we've done those things, but at the same time, um, I have grown my own identity towards what that means for me, and I'm sure Dave has too. It may have started out to, when I first went back to school to get my degree, it was to, become a supervisor. But I immediately realized it was more than just being a supervisor. It was more about, impacting other people, helping other people. And so what started out as, a piece of paper that people are going to recognize and say, hey, yeah, you meet the qualifications for a job. But it became more me opening my mind to the possibilities, and then going with that. And like I say, not just staying in that lane of, okay, this is going to help you advance your career. And I think I've said this before, but it became more than that. And even to further myself, become an author and all those things, it was about following who I am and what I was capable of, and not having those restrictions and limitations placed against me or on me, but just to continue down that path of trying to, be who the best person I could be. And so that's why I think we refer to this as, not so ordinary. Just not accepting those things that aligns you with everybody else, but it continues to separate us. It continues to isolate who we are truly, and not follow any template or any model of what's expected of us or who we should be. So
Right,
that's my
right.
take on it, and I know I've probably rambled for a little bit, so I'll hand it back off to you about your version of not so ordinary people.
Yeah. And Joe, I picked up on a couple of things that you'd mentioned that really resonated with me. Being true to yourself, being your authentic self, and being honest with yourself on who you really are and what you want to be and what you want to do for yourself and for others. One of the examples I have is, and I've been asked this question a handful of times by people, and that is, why did I, in the books I've written, not the college textbooks, but the other books, the on career development and career transitioning, why do I bring up and talk about, uh, and I only mention it briefly in my books, about not having a good childhood and not doing well in school, and some of my personal relationships weren't the best. Why do I mention that? What's the value in that? And do you really need to have that in there? Why don't you just take that out? And I deliberately added those in there because I'm okay with myself. I'm okay with my past. I can't change it. I need to embrace it. It's part of who I am and who I've become. And if I'm being honest with myself, I have to accept some of the
Yep.
things in my past that I may not like what happened or like what I did through my younger years and learning to be an adult. So I bring that up and mention it in my books because it's a common thing. It's not uncommon. It shows that I am normal, that we are normal, that we're just like everyone else, that we don't have perfect childhoods, we don't have perfect upbringings, we are not without our flaws and issues, but that's it. And from that point, once I establish that baseline, hey, we're normal just like you guys, just like everyone that's listening. We're normal people. The point is, what did we do to become not so ordinary? And for some people, it may be being the first person to go to college in your family. It may be the first person to go into the military in your family. Maybe the first person to retire from a company or a job or the military. It may be completing a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or a master's degree or a doctorate. It may be writing a book. It may be just graduating or getting a GED from high school. It may be something, and I'm not trying to sound flippant, as simple as that. But for some people, that is the piece in their life that separates them from being ordinary versus not so ordinary. They went above and beyond in some way, shape, or form. It may be
Right.
pursuing that dream of being an artist, a musician, an actor, an actress. It may be that dream of of having your own business. Um, it, it's really, what are we doing to go above and beyond for ourselves and those around us? And the example of writing a book, going back to that, yes, that was for myself, but it was also for my son. And it was also for everybody else that I can reach out and touch that has not had a perfect childhood upbringing, that had challenges, and to show them that you can be normal and choose to become not so ordinary. You can be
Right.
ordinary and choose to become not so ordinary. So again, going back to some of our other podcasts, conscious choice, what is success, what is motivation, what are we doing when we're being introspective and honest and true to ourselves, to your point, being authentic with ourselves, having those conversations with ourselves and saying, what do I want to do? What do I really want to do? What do I really want to accomplish that's going to help me become not so ordinary, not just another person in the crowd, not just a number in a stack of resumes or applicants? What are we doing to become the best we can possibly be? That not so ordinary version of who we were early in our childhoods or early in our careers. What are we doing to become not so ordinary? What is that conscious choice? What are those plans, dreams, and actions that we're taking to accomplish those goals, to say, hey, I did it. I've accomplished this. I'm proud of it. And I don't have any regrets because I laid
Right.
it all out there,
Right.
So when I think of being not so ordinary, that's what I think of. overcoming some of the challenges or the biases or the negative thoughts and feelings about ourselves or perceptions about ourselves that we've acquired, all this dirt and junk from our past, and we're carrying them around in suitcases, our baggage, if
Right,
you will,
right,
and say, you know what? These bags don't have to be that heavy. As a matter of fact, I don't have to carry these bags with me anymore. I'm dropping them and I'm going to do what I want to do. Again, to your point, within the realms of being legal
right, right,
and
right,
moral and ethical.
right,
But what are we doing to take that extra step to say, hey, I'm good, I'm at peace, I'm happy, I'm in the moment, I'm
right.
enjoying life to its fullest because I'm not just like everybody else. I'm not so ordinary anymore, you know?
Dave, you brought up a good point about the piece about sharing who you were,
Right.
because
Were. Yeah.
yeah, because if people see you today and they didn't know your story, their perception of you or their mindset around you would probably be totally different.
Mhm.
They're not going to have that relationship of where you started, how you got there, and I also do the same thing because
Absolutely.
people
You've got a great story too, Joe.
yeah, and you have to tell that story because you don't know how many people you might touch or how many people that may have
Right.
been in those types of situations or currently in those situations that now you can be viewed as an example, as a someone who that they can look up to. And not that that's why I did this or why you did it, but it's just to show, like you said, you can change your environment. You can change where you come from to where you are today. And the other part of that that you said is very important is accepting who you were and
Mm.
now moving on from that. And I think that's very important as well, because I think some people, get stuck in who they were and they don't know how to move away from that. And so it hinders them advancing or moving forward in their life or in their careers. And so that's also another piece of that critical self-reflection that you have to be willing to, accept those good and bad things, and then make adjustments based on that. So those two things that you just mentioned are very important, and I encourage other people to share their story. So I was at a retirement here probably 7 or 8 years ago now, with one of my mentors when she was retiring from the military. And, I up to that point, I knew who she was. And like I said, she was my mentor, but I didn't know all the details about her. So, when they were reading off this retirement script about her, all these things that she had accomplished. And then she continued to, talk about those things. And the one thing that I'll remember that she told me was, tell your story. And from that day forward, I had been telling my story just so people know who I was, but it really became more intentional about me telling my story. Because like I said, up to that point, I'd known her for years, but I didn't know all those intricate details about who she was, what she had to overcome. And so that made total sense for me to now tell my story. And like you said, include all those things from the very beginning. And that's why I just told my story about being, a nerd all this time and me trying to overcome that by trying to be Joe Cool. And I wasn't. So those are those things that you have to talk about, overcome them, and then realize that maybe they were holding you back or hindering you in some way. But you have to be able to really look at yourself, be true to yourself, be authentic to yourself. And that's the way you advance and move to the next level. So I think those couple of things that you mentioned are very important when you're looking to be not so ordinary, and to try and overcome being just the status quo, or like you mentioned, being not so ordinary is maybe you're the first person in your family that's got a college degree or something like that. And, I've said it before, my dad didn't even have a high school diploma. So when I became a high school graduate, he was in tears. And at that moment, I was not so ordinary because most of his
Yep.
brothers and sisters didn't graduate high school. So at
Hmm.
that moment, I had already started that journey of being not so ordinary in his eyes. But the other thing that you mentioned, I may have lost my train of thought a little bit, but about um, being not being so ordinary, but for the right reasons, or you said
Right,
for
right,
along that line. But that's also important too, because you could go back to being ordinary if you're doing it to appease someone else,
right.
or so it still comes down to you being true to yourself, and authentic with yourself about where you're trying to go, what you're trying to achieve. So yeah,
Yeah.
you were spot on with those things in
You brought
reference
up a,
to.
yeah, you brought up a great point, Joe, about not regressing and going back.
Yeah,
And there may be a reason or a point in your life where that becomes appropriate. Um, for me, I struggled with self-confidence growing up through my high school years. I found my confidence when I went in the military. And
mm,
so, I viewed, I'm going to use the term that you used, being a nerd, as being someone that was smart, that was really smart, and
right,
when I was in high school and elementary school, and I did not consider myself smart. I didn't even consider myself, you know, being being able to achieve the status of being a nerd, because those were the kids that were working on computers and, you
right,
know,
right.
getting like high scores on their exams and making straight A's. And I was like, yeah, that was like a dream. It'd be cool if I could be that smart, you know?
Right,
So when I went into the military, I struggled with my confidence because I didn't think I had the smarts to do something really cool like that. And then when I got out of the military, well, and for those of you that have listened to several of our podcasts, I've been in 3 times. It wasn't until the second time I was in where one of my supervisors said, "Hey, David, you need to get into college." And I'm like, yeah. So there was that conversation, that weird and awkward conversation. And I took a couple of classes. I did well. And I was like, wow, I think I can do this. And then, of course, like most people, I stopped going to college after a
yep,
couple of classes.
yep.
And a couple of years went by and I jumped back into it. And then when I graduated, I was like, wow, I didn't make straight A's, but I still graduated with an A average. Does that make me a nerd? I think it might. I'm
Right,
smart. And I rolled right into my master's degree and got not all A's, and, not straight A's, but an A average. Same with my doctoral program. So yeah, I'm proud to say I'm a nerd, because,
right,
or a geek or whatever you want to call it, because I became that smart person that I always wanted to be. And that ability to achieve a college education has gave me more confidence than joining the military. However, joining the military was a step in becoming not so ordinary, because not everyone in my high school went to the military.
right,
There's only a handful of us. Majority of the people went straight into college or didn't go to college.
right.
So, what are we doing to make conscious choices to become not so ordinary, to better ourselves? And through bettering ourselves, we become a sort or a form of being a role model, because we're
Yep,
showing others that you don't have to accept the negative aspects of your past as being a deliberate and big portion of your current place or your
the
future. You
future,
can,
right,
to your point, you can decide to change that. You can let that baggage go. You can leave it in the airport and no one's going to, look you up and say, "Hey, you got to claim your crap over here." It's like they're going to throw it away because they don't want your
right,
baggage either. So, it's really a great opportunity, and it's very liberating to start making these conscious choices to become not so ordinary, because you are doing what you want to do. You're finding that passion, that inner joy, and the things that really drive and motivate you to becoming a better person. That's step one. Once you get there, what you do with it is step two. You can covet it and keep it to yourself and never share it, which is something I do not believe in. Or you can spread your knowledge and your experience and your skills, the good and the bad times that you've had, so that others can learn. And to our point again, so they don't have to take the long scenic
Right,
route.
right,
So
right,
um, you know, there's a tremendous amount of joy that I have found in sharing my story. And I love listening to other people's stories because you're right. To your point, if people were to see me or to see you and see doctor before our names, they're automatically going to have their own biases and perceptions
right, right,
about what doctors and what those educated people in suits look like and what they act like and what they've been through. And I'll say we like many other people have broken that mold. We are not the
right,
typical people that grew up in the upper class or elitist class with everything paid for. We've had to work and struggle and fight for and make some very difficult decisions and investments with our time, not sacrifices, investments with our time to get to where we are. And those stories help to inspire others. And that's part of why we do what we do, is to
right.
inspire others. So journeys of not so ordinary people and becoming not so ordinary is really about conscious choice and then sharing the gifts that we have that make us happy.
So I'll follow up with that, Dave, because you're right. All of us have that ability to be so not so ordinary, but like you just said, it's that conscious decision to remain not so ordinary,
Mhm.
and to embrace whatever those differences are, and to embark upon those things beyond what's the ordinary, and just
Mhm.
continuing. And the thing that you just said about sharing who you are and what things you bring to the table is also important. So, all these years, I've always tried to help people, but it seems more so now that I realize who I am and what I have to offer. It just now I can't see myself not doing that. I can't
Right.
see myself sitting back and just watching other people struggle,
Right.
without offering advice. Even if
Yeah.
you're at the grocery store, you hear somebody talking about it, you say, hey, I know about this. Or at the airport, you're sitting around
Mhm.
waiting for your flight, and you hear conversations, and you kind of you listen to it, you're not being nosy, but some of those things spark your interest, or perk your ears up, and you
Sure.
want to kind of just get involved. So that's what not so ordinary people are people that are just not gonna sit back. They're not just
Mhm.
gonna follow this straight line, because we all have our own journeys. And for the most part, it's you now have the opportunity to direct your journey. You still may run into obstacles and things like that, but you
Absolutely.
can now try and navigate through those you know nasty waters or whatever obstacles you may face. But that's the beauty in being not so ordinary, that you recognize where you came from, and embrace that. And then now how you apply that moving forward,
Mm.
whether it's you continue to advance or you assist others. But that's a very powerful place to be in, that
Yeah.
you can, dictate your future, where you end up, where you go, what things you do, and that's very rewarding as well, because what tomorrow holds, or you have an idea of what tomorrow holds. Because if we go back to my example I provided probably early on in the podcast, where I talked about your journey, you want to go to the East Coast, and you start in the Midwest. um, you basically say you want to go to Washington, D.C., but you just get in your car and just start driving, and hope that you choose the right routes, that you make it there. rather than, setting out, looking at the weather, looking at the roads ahead, looking at, how long it's going to take you, how many miles it is, how many stops you're going to have to make, how much money you're going to need to, stop at a hotel to eat, mapping out that plan versus just, again, jumping in the car and driving until you run into the ocean
Right.
because you haven't made any plans. So that's the power in recognizing that you're not ordinary, and to now navigate based on those things that or that you can project. And that's the power, and again, being not so ordinary, and not relying on somebody else to
Mhm.
dictate. So you work for a company, you've been working there 15 years. Tomorrow they announce that they're shutting the business down, they're closing the doors. Where do you go from there?
Mhm.
Right. And
Right.
because you have just stayed status quo, you haven't gained any certifications, you haven't gone back to school, now you're left trying to figure out what to do next. But
Mhm.
in the same token, you've been working for that company for 15 years. You went back to school, got a degree, you earned some certification, you learned some different skills. So now when you get laid off along with, say, 500 other people, you have something that's going to separate you from your peers. And so again, that's that understanding, that I've got to be different, that I got to embrace my differences, I've got to improve upon my differences to get to the next level. So if you look at it that way, in terms of, where you go next, and whether you make that decision to, say, leave that company, or that company blindsides you and says, hey, we're shutting our doors, you're going to be in a better position than again,
Absolutely.
if you just allow yourself to stay status quo, stay ordinary, just continue to
Mhm.
do the things that people expect of you.
Mhm.
Then you're going to get what you get, versus having that laid out plan that's going to get you to the next level. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we wind down and transition to a close here, any final thoughts? Got you as you're drinking, taking a
yeah,
sip.
you hit me right when I'm going to take a drink of coffee.
That's been,
Um,
I practiced that for weeks, by the way.
yeah, it was perfectly executed. But yeah, just back to what we said. We're all not so ordinary. It's whether we, embrace that, whether
Yeah.
we continue to build upon it, and to, you know, celebrate those differences, and not being ordinary. And like I say, it took me till I'm almost 50 years old to recognize that I'm a nerd.
Hmm.
And like you said, I love it now. I embrace it because it is who I am and who I've always been. I just tried to, shut that part of me out, or, silence that who I was. So I was inside, probably really just tearing myself up. So I just encourage people to embrace their differences and who they are, and to also encourage other people to embrace their
Hmm.
differences and who they are.
Very well said. I'm going to piggyback on that as we close out and say, and share those gifts with other people.
Yeah,
Some of
yeah,
my happiest moments are when I'm able to share my story with others so that they can learn and grow as well.
yeah,
Seeing people struggle is just heart wrenching and breaks my heart. And if I can say something to cheer them up, or to help them think about something that they may not have thought about, or to let them know that they're not alone and that anything is possible, all they need to do is figure out what they want to do and make a choice and start acting upon that choice, then that's a win for everybody.
right.
So,
Yep.
and to your point, embrace the not so ordinary piece of who you are, really embrace it. I mean, I've seen so many people throughout my career resist who they really are, their authentic self. And when they find it, you think, wow, I never thought that person would go from finance to art, or
Right,
from
right,
an executive position to going for a for-profit company to being a line person teaching others for a nonprofit,
right.
because it's
Yep.
so counter to what they were doing or who they used to be. So yeah, share your stories, help other people. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and embrace who you are and make those conscious choices to become a better person. So
Yeah.
with that, until next time, have a wonderful day and keep on being your not so ordinary you.